Hey guys, Dean here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I passed my practical driving test around a month ago, and I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks on the best ways to get it done and how to pass it hopefully on your first time. Now, I also did a video on how to pass the theory test as well, how to revise for it, and the best ways to learn. So you can click on the link down below if you're on that stage and you want help with the theory test. But if you're getting to the point where you're getting ready for your practical test, hopefully this video should be useful for you. So first of all, before you actually go to test, you need to make sure that you ensure that you've done the right vehicle safety checks. So usually, obviously, if you're paying for driving lessons, you're probably going to be using your instructor's vehicle, which they've probably done all the necessary tests themselves, because otherwise they won't be able to do lessons, right? But if you are bringing your own vehicle or your own car, which you can actually learn in with your instructor if you've already purchased your own vehicle, you need to make sure that your vehicle is actually safe to use and safe to drive. So this means check the fluid levels, check the brakes, and also the tire tread depth. Make sure everything's okay for the day, because you don't want to cancel test or you don't want to run into any issues with the actual vehicle, because that's just the first step, right? Make sure it's up to the test standards and it's properly equipped for the day before you get started for a positive beginning. So the next thing also a lot of people tend to forget is also just don't forget your documentation on the day. Okay, you need to bring those required and necessary documents to the test center on the day before you do your test, because you need to be verified, you need to be checked in, they need to make sure that you have everything on you. Now this means at least bring your provisional driving license. Sometimes they do say that you need to bring your theory test pass certificate. I didn't have to personally bring it. If you can bring both, it's better than just bringing one, but do bring your provisional driving license, because that's usually all you need to bring. Don't forget your provisional driving license. Do this the night before you actually go to test, because otherwise you're going to have to cancel it and reschedule it and go home. Now obviously, if you do want to pass the practical driving test as well, you need to actually have a good instructor, right? Now I was lucky enough to have a good instructor. I had to wait, I think, months on a waiting list to actually get a driving test slot. Now during the pandemic, there was a few different lockdowns. Before I moved house originally, I actually started my driving lessons, I think, in 2020. And basically, I started those driving lessons at the end of 2020, and I was making some pretty good progress. I think I did like 12 hours of lessons. Then obviously the pandemic came and we had like 3 or 4 different lockdowns. So the driving lessons kept getting cancelled like 3 or 4 times. And I ended up wasting a lot of money, and I had to stop the driving lessons until I think the start of this year in 2023. So I lost like 2.5 years of time basically of learning to drive because of the pandemic, which was really annoying. And also I was traveling at the end of the pandemic, and I was basically stuck on a waiting list for months to actually get a driving instructor to actually start learning. So I lost a lot of time before even beginning. So I was open to accept anyone that would actually teach me to drive. Now I was very lucky to have a good instructor who knew what she was doing, and she also pushed me a lot. I was grateful just to get lessons in general because I'd been waiting for so long. But before you start your driving lessons, you need to make sure you source a good instructor, make sure they have good reviews, make sure people know them in the community. I saw at the test center that there was like a new driving instructor that they hadn't really seen before the other instructors, and they were kind of wondering if he was really like a good instructor because nobody had actually vouched for him. So make sure you're actually driving with an instructor who's been vouched for, who's had students who have passed. Maybe they have a high pass rate, and that will obviously set you up for success. Now the reason why my instructor was particularly good is she was very critical when I made mistakes, especially when I make repeated mistakes, because I messed up a whole bunch of times, especially when I was on, I think, the really big roundabouts, and also at the very start when I was learning crossroads. I was making a whole lot of mistakes on crossroads. She was very critical, and those kind of instructors are good because when they get critical, you don't want to annoy them or make them angry again next time, so you make sure you learn it and you get it right the next time. And that's what really pushed me and actually helped me to pass, because she was getting annoyed and frustrated that I was making the same mistakes over and over again, so I made sure that I actually didn't do them again. So that's really important. Now the next one is utilizing mock tests. Consider taking your mock test with your instructor when you feel like you're up to the right level to actually begin doing them. Obviously, after you've learned all the basics, there'll be a point in the learning curve, I guess, where you get to a point where you've kind of learned all the fundamentals. There's nothing really more you can learn. You've been kind of showed all the basics, you've been showed the ropes. You just need to put them into practice. And after you've put them into practice, you've showed that you understand them thorough enough, then you'll probably start doing mock tests with your instructor. This is kind of like the lead up at the end towards your practical test, where you've you've learned most things, you just have to practice them, right? You're basically emulating a real practical test, but it's a mock test, so it's a fake test. Obviously, you're not gonna get your license if you pass it. It's just setting you up to see how well you're gonna do. So mock tests are really good because they familiarize yourself with the real test format and how it's going to be for you, and you can receive feedback on your actual skills before the real test, so you can kind of know where you are. So when I started doing mock tests, I was still making a few mistakes. I think at first I was still getting like 2 or 3 dangerous and major marks, so I wasn't doing very good at the start, but you'll get to a point where you just suddenly make a big improvement. Like at the end, I went down to only like 2 marks, and I think there were 2 minors. So you'll get to a point where you consistently keep making mistakes on the mocks, and you won't really know how to adjust and improve. But then at the end, it'll just kind of click, and you'll just drive well. There'll be a day where you just drive really well. Then next week you'll drive really well, and you'll get those down to like maybe 1 or 2 minors only, and that's when you're ready for your real test. So mock tests are really good. I actually did weeks of mock tests to get to where I needed to be because I kept making so many mistakes. I kept going to certain roads and not really know what I was doing. There was like traffic light crossroads where I was not sitting in the right box, or I was like parked over a crossing, just really silly rookie mistakes which I kept repeating, and you need to keep ironing those out. And it gets to the point where you've done so many lessons, you should really know what you're doing, and if you're making those same mistakes in mock tests, you just need to keep doing them to basically put it in your mind not to do them next time. So the point is, mock tests are really useful, and alternating those in between with regular lessons as well near the end can really improve on weaknesses, and this really helped me iron out those mistakes I was making. Most of my mistakes were just silly oversights, so I wasn't really needing to do more lessons. I just needed to focus and do the mock tests and not actually have too much pressure on myself. Now also, feedback's really important, okay? So whether you're in your lessons or if you don't really understand the results from the mock tests themselves, you need to regularly ask for feedback. Now a good instructor is going to give you all the feedback you need, but you need to work with them. You need to tell them why you're doing something wrong, what's stopping you from progressing, and where you need to practice on. Because for me, for an example, before I actually did my real test, I made sure to tell my instructor, look, mock tests are really good, but the last 2 mock tests we've done really well. I actually need to practice on these specific areas in a lesson before the test day, because those are the things that are going to fail me. And luckily, because I did that, we practiced on those things and ironed those out, and that's why I passed the first time. And I definitely am not really the kind of student that probably anyone thought was going to get the first time pass on a driving test, because I was making a lot of mistakes. But because I actually took feedback and actually asked the right questions, I actually worked upon the flaws that I had, and when it came to those same flaws being tested in the practical test, I actually passed with flying colours. So it's really important that you don't stay quiet and you actually ask questions to your instructor, take feedback on board, and actually be easy to work with and actually be coachable, because then that's where you can actually get to where you need to be. Because if you don't take advice on board and you're not very open-minded and you can't take critical feedback, you're not going to actually improve. Now one thing also is practicing in different conditions. Look, we don't know what the weather's going to be on test day. It might be snowing for all we know, which in likely cases is probably going to mean that the test is actually cancelled, but your test will actually go ahead if it's raining, okay? I've driven so many driving lessons while it's been raining, especially when it's not too bad. Even when it's torrential rain, you will still do your lessons, okay? You need to actually learn to practice driving in these conditions, because when you're actually on the road, when you've got your license and you're actually passed, you're going to be tested regularly, right? Because the weather, you can't control it by the snap of your fingers. It's just Mother Nature, it's just God, right? So you're always needing to practice driving in conditions because you're going to face them anyway. And you need to make sure you're ready for any scenario on test day, because look, it might rain, it might snow, whether it's rain or shine, you're going to be doing that test. Unless it's literally everything's caved in, it's probably not going to be cancelled. So on my test day, I do have to note it did rain a little bit, but not too heavy. So I only had to use the intermittent wipers on the car to actually deal with that. So it wasn't really a big problem. It didn't really cause much trouble. But because I drove in those different conditions, I knew how to use the wipers, I knew how to operate all the car's controls, and I knew how to do that without prompt by myself. And obviously on test day, switch them on, rained for like 5 minutes, switch them off, we were okay? So you need to go through those things in case you come into those situations. And there could be heavy rain or other conditions, okay? And you need to know how to drive safe in those conditions, because if you've always just been taking lessons when it's dry and then test day comes and the conditions are different, you're just going to be out of your own depth, right? You're just going to be confused. You're going to be like, not sure what to do, the instructor's going to know that, and you're probably going to get marked for it when you make a mistake. Make sure you know how to drive in these different conditions, and make sure you know the separation distance you need in these conditions too, because if you're in rain and if you're in snow, those are much different to driving in dry conditions. The seconds of a gap you have to have between the car in front of you is a lot different, okay, so you can drive safely. So make sure you keep that in mind. Now, one big thing you really do need to practice is what's called the show me tell me questions. Now, I rehearsed these quite religiously in the days prior to the actual test. You can revise these in a few different ways. So the main one is just to go to the gov.uk website, and you can also use some different apps like practice apps for them as well. And these are things that you need to be able to show within the vehicle itself, and also tell, basically in theory, how something works, or what would you do in order to do something. You'll get one show me question in total, and you'll get one tell me question. And if you get one of those wrong, you'll get basically a minor mark. So you'll get one minor per question you get wrong. These basically include everything from how would you adjust the head restraint on your vehicle, to checking the oil levels or the brake fluid levels, or how to operate the demisters in the vehicle, for an example. There's a few different questions. If you actually verse yourself in all of them, then you won't have a problem. I basically just revised all of them back and forth until I kind of knew them off by heart, and then I could answer them. When you know them off by heart, it's almost like you're reading from a script in your mind because you've rehearsed them so much, but you need to practice them to a point where you actually understand them, and then it's just very simple for you to basically recall. This is why knowing how to actually operate a car's controls is actually really easy. Now, for an example, the rear demisters, or demisters, however you want to say it, is kind of confusing because you have icons, you have like a square, and then you have like an arc shape, and you think that the arc shape would be the back window, whereas the arc shape is actually the front and the square is the back, so it can be quite confusing. On some vehicles, including the one I actually was driving, it just says front and back on the buttons anyway, so it's really easy to understand. But you might need to know the icons off by heart if your vehicle doesn't actually have a label on it. Now, your instructor will actually go over these with you beforehand, and they'll show you like the vehicle if they already haven't. You can also reference the vehicle's manual itself, which if you own the vehicle you have access to, or you can just find it online if you know the model of the actual car. Next one is make sure you're proficient in the maneuvers. This is probably the biggest one that makes people fail. This is where people really get a pitfall. I know a few people, not naming names, that have told me that they didn't specifically really know certain maneuvers, and they got lucky that they didn't have to do those maneuvers. I was scared of this, and I'm glad they told me that, because that was great advice for me to take on board, so I didn't do the same thing. The examiner will basically pick one of a few different maneuvers for you to perform on test to complete. So this could be the parallel park, this could be the forward or reverse bay park, or pulling up on the right hand side of the road and reversing roughly 2 car lengths. Okay, so those are the usual standard maneuvers. Now, don't think you can just skirt past these for test day and only know like 1 or 2 of them. You need to be proficient in all of them, okay? Because they're going to give a random one, they're going to pick it out of the bag, and they're going to give you that one. Sure, you could be lucky and you get your preferred maneuver which is chosen, and you could just pass with flying colours. But if the one that you're not very good at gets picked and you fail, then you'll know about it and you'll need to redo your test. So just go over them with your instructor. If one's a weakness, just keep practicing it and make sure they're ready for test day. I wasn't very good at the reverse bay park at first, and I had to really practice to get that done. And I actually got really good reverse bay parks up until the test day. But the practice time frame before the test started, I was messing up all my reverse bay parks because I really needed to go to the toilet. And I think my instructor probably thought that I was going to fail because I was messing up the reverse bays. But luckily, when the test slot actually came, like in the next half an hour or so, and I started my test, I was just really relaxed. I prepared myself accordingly. I was just really calm throughout the whole test. And at the end, I performed a perfect reverse bay park. I say perfect, it was just kind of a little bit slanted at the back, but it was within the lines and it was near enough perfect. And I think everyone was surprised that I did that because I messed them up basically before, because I was a little bit nervous and I also obviously hadn't been to the toilet. So make sure you know everything back to back and make sure you're proficient in them, because you don't want something to go wrong. And the only reason I didn't fail because of that is because I practiced so much on that reverse bay to make sure I could actually do it. But it's different doing a reverse bay park when there's a lot of traffic already parked and when there's an empty bay. I realized that because I'd been practicing in an empty car park, which was like a 4 or 5 slot car park, and then when 2 or 3 of those slots are filled, it's a whole lot easier when you've got less positions to actually choose from. So practice under every single scenario in those maneuvers as well. And then the next tip is obviously just know when you're ready. I think at this point you probably just know when you're ready. Now, luckily my instructor actually had a good eye for when I was ready, and I got the pass in time for basically the deadline I set for myself, because I basically said, okay, okay, because I've wasted 2.5 years because of these lockdowns and all the delays and waiting on a waiting list, I want to at least make sure I've passed this driving license when I'm 25 before I turn 26. And that was basically my non-negotiable, okay? So I wanted to pass it before I was 26 because all this time had already been wasted. Now, luckily, in like 1 or 2 weeks, it was going to be my birthday, but my instructor thought, okay, you seem like you might be ready. Let's just give you a chance, okay? Let's just book the test date. Now, bear in mind, I didn't actually think I was ready at this point for the test because I'd actually been making some mistakes. But because 1 or 2 of my mock tests had been good, I guess she thought that I was ready to do it. Now, I didn't actually have full confidence in myself that I was, but I decided just to go with it and just let's give it a crack. Okay, and that's where obviously all the practice and revision came into it to make sure I was ready leading up to it. Usually average learners, apparently from research, they take like 45 to 50 hours of driving with an instructor on lessons, and also 22 hours of practice with a parent or an accompanying driver or guardian to pass this test. I think I did somewhere north of like 70 hours with the instructor because I didn't really drive any more than like 1 or 2 hours with my parents. And then I think like 3 years before that, I said like 12 hours, right? I think I did like an additional 12 hours. But my first instructor I had 3 years ago, before reattempting the lessons, was quite slow and I didn't really learn quick enough. So those 12 hours just kind of went completely forgotten about. Let's just say I did like 70 hours, which actually counted. And that's how long it took me to pass. And I didn't drive with my parents more than like 1 or 2 hours. Okay, so the next tip is basically preparing yourself mentally and physically. We all know that nerves is the biggest problem. People might be nervous leading up to the test and they think that's probably what's going to make them fail. So here's how I dealt with it. This is just like a combination of all the tips I learned off YouTube and how I prepared myself personally. So I ate a banana leading up till the test because apparently people just kept recommending online, just eat a banana, it's good to relax your muscles and nerves. There's something to do with that like helps you. Don't really know what the science is, but I ate a banana, whether it's a placebo or not, it actually really did help me. I think it probably did relax my muscles or something, which potassium actually does, which is what's in a banana. But I also drank a coffee and I drank a lot of water. Now the water nearly made me fail the test because, like I said, those reverse bays before the test on my practice run, I failed them because I was needing the toilet because I drank so much water. So that was a mistake. But after I'd actually been to the toilet, I was really hydrated. That allowed me to basically be really calm and have mental clarity. So I had a banana, I drank enough water, and I also drank coffee. So I was alert, I was relaxed, and I was ready to do the test. Also, one thing which I did is I made sure the night before I got adequate sleep. But I made sure I had like ample enough sleep, like tons of sleep before the real test. Being well rested basically prevents you driving dangerously. You don't want to just sleep for only like a couple of hours because then you're just putting other people at risk. So I made sure I slept a very long time before the test. And also this shows you care for the road users and pedestrians, okay? So this is a given. This is not just for your test. Make sure you have enough sleep, but make sure you have perfect sleep before you test, just to make sure those variables are in check. If you usually sleep like 7.5 hours, make sure you sleep 8. You get the deal, right? Just make sure you're on point. Also, relaxation is really important. You need to make sure that you stay calm to think clearly and actually perform well during the test. Luckily for me, the nerves actually came after I'd finished the test because I was thinking, okay, did I do well enough? Did I get marked bad? But I was actually calm while doing it. So I'm glad they actually onset after the test. Also, talk if needed, okay? You can communicate with the examiner if it actually helps you. And I actually made use of this, okay? Some people like to concentrate in silence. I like to do that sometimes too. Some people like to talk. And I actually just told the examiner, look, I said, sorry, my friend, but if I talk too much, I hope it doesn't bother you because I basically have a bad habit of like talking too much while I'm driving. And that was kind of like a funny icebreaker between us and he just kind of laughed. You've just got to remember, this is what I was told by my instructor and it's kind of just common sense. Like, examiners are just normal people at the end of the day. They're all super friendly and they just want you to pass, and they do so many tests per day that you just like another number to them, so they're not really too bothered about you in that regard. There's no reason to like have any added pressure. And the examiner who graded my test, and also all the other DVSA examiners as well, like they were really super friendly, they were really like talkative, they were really nice and like smiley and happy all the time, so it was really easy to actually like be calm under pressure. The examiner also, you could tell he had a lot of experience. I think he told me he'd been doing it for like 15 years or something, but he knew when to respond to me when we were talking and also when to be quiet when I needed to focus, and he actually had like a really excellent gauge on how to do this, and because of that it was really easy to like talk and also concentrate when I needed to, so it was like the perfect balance. When you have an examiner who's really experienced, they'll know how to do that. So when you're like approaching like a roundabout or a junction or like a crossroads, they'll be quiet, and when you're driving on like a long straight, then they'll be a little bit more chatty to you. So that's something which is really useful, so don't be afraid to like make conversation, especially if you're a little bit nervous or if you're you get a little bit shy behind the wheel. Me personally, it just allowed me not to be like too nervous, because if you're overthinking about your own driving whilst you're on the road, it can be easy to make mistakes. So just drive like you usually would. You're not trying to impress anyone, and you can talk whilst doing it, okay? You need to believe in yourself as well. That's another thing. Like when I got in the vehicle beforehand, I genuinely believed I'm going to pass. I need to pass, so I'm going to pass, okay? If you genuinely believe in yourself, you will pass, and you'll perform as you will need to pass. I didn't say I might fail, and I stopped myself and caught myself when I said I'll try, because that's just obviously setting yourself up for failure. If you'll try, that means obviously you're kind of speaking bad karma into existence, because if you're going to try, you don't think that you're going to pass it, right? Genuinely be confident and tell yourself you will pass the test the first time, and that you're ready, and that you've learned so many hours of lessons for a reason, and you're ready to pass the test. And when you're on the road, don't overthink too. That's really important, because you can just be thinking, what's the examiner doing? What's he doing with like the pad? Is he like marking me down? Just drive normally. You're driving normally on the test. Don't overthink that you're on a test. Just relax. Drive how you were on lessons when you were doing well. Give way when necessary, particularly just drive safe. Always give way when you're supposed to. Look for hazards. That's the reason why you did your hazard perception test on the theory test, right? And don't do anything dangerous. One thing for me which was always messing me up before I was ready to actually take a driving test is my forward planning just wasn't there. And that's something which I practiced on for like 2 months leading up till the test, because it just needed improving. On test day, make sure you have forward planning. Look where you're going, look what's happening with other road users and pedestrians who might just walk out in front of you, and know exactly what you're going to do 10 steps ahead. If you do that, then you're not going to mess up. If there's like a small gap between cars and you think you could squeeze through, but it might not be a good idea, don't second guess it, just wait. There's so many times that I just stopped like a good distance before the junction and just waited for someone to come through, or just waited at the side of the road for traffic to flow and then took my position just because it was safe to do so. Don't rush, drive safely, drive even more safely if you need to. If you have to second think about something, it's not worth doing. Okay, so test day. Test days come. What do you need to do on test day? Well, first of all, you should arrive early to the test center. If you're already with your instructor, my instructor basically did like a 3-hour slot so we could practice it a little bit before. You need to arrive early because that avoids you rushing around, kind of scrambling to know what you're doing, and you then have time to prepare, okay? Like I said, I drank too much water, but since I got there really early, I could just go to the test center and just go to the toilet and then still have half an hour spare to practice and wait because I got there early enough. Also, another thing, you'll do an eyesight check. So you'll do an eyesight check before you get in the vehicle. This is just so that they know that you can roughly read like a license plate. I think it's up to 20 meters away. And if you need to wear glasses, which is important. So obviously if you fail that check, you're probably going to fail the test unless you've got your glasses with you. Now I want to move on to the last section, right? So I think this is going to help the most people. So the last section is going to be regarding preparation and practice. And this is just going to be how you can prepare and what to do when you're on the road. So the first thing which really helped me, and this is kind of like a mental hack, this is overemphasizing your checks. Okay, this doesn't mean do more checks than you would usually. This doesn't mean like perform differently just because you're on test and you're being watched. This means you should be doing your checks anyway, but making sure that the checks you do are more obvious to show the examiner you're actually aware of your surroundings. This really helps because most examiners who are really like experienced, they won't miss a trick. Okay, so they'll see exactly in the mirrors where your eyes are looking, what you do, and where you are. But for new examiners, or maybe if it's like a quick situation when they blink and miss something, overemphasizing the checks, maybe for a few extra seconds or doing them again, will make sure that they don't miss them and they don't mark you down for something you didn't do wrong. They'll likely see them, but this is just like a little hack as well. As well as overemphasizing checks, you can also do like a mental commentary in your head. Like when I did something, like when I was checking, I'd say to myself out loud, I'm just checking left to make sure no traffic's coming. Okay, now I'm going to go. Or I'm just stopping here because I don't want to block the junction and there's a car which has the right of way, so I'm going to wait for them. So I kind of commentated why I was making certain choices. And you don't need to do this, but it also shows the examiner that you actually understand the highway code and you know what you're doing, okay? Because even though they can kind of understand your actions, they also understand that you're knowledgeable and you know why you're doing it. And that's really important. You don't need to do that to pass your test, but like I said, overemphasizing your choices means that they're confident in passing you because you're actually a safety on the road. And that just goes back to the point which I made before, right? Drive normally how you would usually. Drive naturally, drive comfortably. You're prepared for this. You've been obviously preparing for this up until this point. And just drive as if you already would have your license. okay? Because the difference between during the test and then 30 to 40 minutes later after you've completed it, the only difference is you've got your pass certificate and you can now drive legally. So just drive as if you're 30 minutes into the future, because you've already passed, right? You already pass until something happens. Let me just stress this a second time. I keep repeating it, but just remember, you're not trying to impress the examiner, okay? Because if you try to impress them, if you try to drive in a different way or do something just to try and like fake how you'd usually drive, you're just going to fail or mess up, okay? Because you can't perform. Just drive how you usually would. You're here to show your normal everyday driving is up to the safety standard that's required to pass, okay? That's the only requirement. So just drive as you would usually and how your instructor has been preparing you to do so. The next one is also something which a lot of people don't do, and that is you can ask your examiner to repeat instructions if you didn't hear them, so you know what to do, and you need to stay calm, okay? So if you stay in silence, you could really mess up because of this, because if the examiner says something and then you don't hear them and you take the wrong turn, which isn't usually a problem, but let's say you take the wrong turn and then at the last second you don't hear them, so you just mess up and change direction, you're going to cause a dangerous maneuver on the road and you're going to get a dangerous point and fail your test. If you didn't hear them, it's better to ask them to repeat themselves than do something stupid and dangerous. Now, if you don't hear them when you're on a roundabout, for an example, and he says take the second exit and you take the first exit instead by accident, but you take the first exit in a way that's safe and not dangerous, then you won't lose a mark for doing that. You can just carry on driving ahead. But if you do something dangerous, that's where you fail your test. So make sure you hear them. If you don't, make sure to repeat themselves. Safely entering and leaving a roundabout, even in the wrong direction to what they told you, is better than doing a dangerous thing, and you won't fail your test by doing that. You might get a minor point at worst, but usually most examiners will just let you off and not grade you with any poor marks just because you made the wrong exit, as long as you did it in a safe way. And the last point which I have, piece of advice, is don't assume you failed. We said earlier, assume that you're going to pass because you're ready to do so. So don't assume you failed, okay? Remember, from the moment that you actually start in that vehicle and they say we're beginning, you've already passed your test, technically, right? You'll only fail if you make a mistake. So when you begin your test and you've started, you've already passed your test until you mess up. So don't assume you failed, okay? Now, the examiner told me one thing. I basically asked him, like, if you're tapping on that data pad or PDA or whatever they have like a tablet, right? They always tap on it. They're always like pressing buttons on it. I said, if you're tapping on that, does that mean I'll get a mark? Have I got a major or a minor mark if I see you tapping on that? He said, no. He said, they always have to click things on the device or read different things and just take random notes. So it doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you've got a major or a dangerous point just because they're tapping on the device. So don't even try to look at the tablet or device, okay? Keep your eyes on the road, keep your eyes on your mirrors and your surroundings, and stay alert and focused. One thing I watched on YouTube that made one boy fail is what he did. He was actually looking down at his gear stick because he was confused on how to change his gear. First of all, you should know how to change your gear without even looking at the gear stick if you're at the point of doing a test. So you're going to fail if you're staring at your gear stick anyway. But the examiner thought him looking at the gear stick, he was actually looking at the examiner's tablet, and that got him marked down and he failed the test. So don't look at what the examiner's doing, just look on the road and there won't be any issues. Now, this was a long video. I also have a video on how to pass the driving theory test, which you can click on the link down below. That should help people who are on the first stage of the driving license. And I hope this has helped some people who are preparing for the driving practical test, because these are all the tips which I learned from watching hundreds of hours of YouTube videos, looking at links on gov.uk and government websites and using different apps on preparing myself for the test. And I wanted to collate all that information into a helpful video as kind of like an all-encompassing guide to help people who are getting ready for the test, and hopefully some of you guys will use this information and actually pass. If any of you guys actually pass after watching this video, leave it down in the comment section down below and let me know, because I hope this had some kind of value to people, because like I said, I just passed like a month ago, so I wanted to share some advice that I actually used successfully, and if it helps anyone, then obviously the mission of this video has been successful. So if this was useful in some way, give the video a like and subscribe. I'll be posting a lot of random videos on this channel about like business and things that I'm doing, so if you want to follow, really appreciate it, and I'll see you real soon.